What is up, everybody? It's a little late. Only a minute. Only a minute. I'm good in my time. So today, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to the Nerd Crate. And welcome to my little show I like to call Crate Hangouts, where I usually sit around a little bit with a few people from different communities. But today, I have the huge honor, like I told him this in the little pre-hangout we had beforehand. He actually scored my nightmares, but in a good way. Today, I can humbly say, welcome, Mr. BRAD FIEDEL.
Hi there.
How's it going? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm lucky to be hunkered down in a really pretty area of just south of Santa Barbara, California. And
Oh, cool.
I'm lucky to have a spacious house and a beautiful garden and my wife here with me. And, so I really feel almost survivor guilt by how easy it is for us, because I've lived in New York, and I'm just imagining, what it's been like. I know things are slowly opening up now, but I'm in the worst of it. I imagine what it would be like to be a single person on the 14th floor of in a studio apartment in New York City, and I'm like, whoa! Talk about mental health challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's different all over the world. It's pretty crazy what COVID-19 is doing to us, but especially also the United States. Like, you guys have crazy high cases. Like in my town, it's got 100,000 citizens, and we just roughly went around 30 cases. So
Right.
it's not that super much. It's not super much, and I believe 26 of those were actually cured. So
Yeah, we have. I just heard recently that California, which is as big as a country, it's a very big state, so it's different, very different in different areas: urban, rural, farming. All the different kinds of places we have within our huge state. But we are having a new spike, and I think that relaxing the opening up is going to have a price. And I'm not one to judge what's right and what's wrong. There is a point where the world has to go on, and I understand that. I just feel that one of the reasons the U.S. is in such bad shape in general does have to do, and I don't want to get into a political discussion,
no,
but
but
it has to do with leadership, and not just now with this administration. They're easy to trash, but I think in general you can see it in so many aspects of our infrastructure, whether it's the power lines, the roads. We've got this instant gratification culture. Very few people willing to really invest their tax dollars or their votes in the long-term thinking.
Yeah.
So one of those infrastructures, I mean, for years we've had local community hospitals closing down.
Wow.
Because in these rural areas, they're privatized. They're companies that want to make a profit, and they just weren't making enough money, so they would close down the hospitals. We've gone into this mode in manufacturing where nobody wants to have stock, meaning like masks in boxes in a warehouse, so they make them as needed.
Yeah, it's over here pretty similar. I got a friend of mine that's actually sent an obey reviews in the chat. He's in medical administration, so he knows the burden of getting the mask and getting disinfection and everything to everybody who's in need. So I hear a few stories about that. But it's also interesting what you said about financial terms. Like, it's pretty easy to now get a loan, actually. But even if you get a loan, if you say, okay, I just grab some money and I don't know, all those split up loans, a TV here, or I don't know, a kitchen there, I just combine that a little bit. I get everything out, and then I just get one loan, and I have all of this in one place where I can actually administrate that one single, burden that also a loan is. But you can't do anything with it, because currently houses and everything is just so expensive. It's just, on the one side you can get money easy, but on the other side, what are you going to do with it? So you cannot even, I don't know, get out of the way easy, all of it. But yeah, like I said, we got it a little bit more easier over here than you guys. So I can actually I can actually now go again into stores, into grocery stores, and just do the usual course instead of, okay, please go this way, and still the 6 yards, but
yeah,
it's way easier than what you guys got over there. But
yeah.
the situation where you are situated in California is way better than everywhere else, or is it I don't know, kind of.
You'd have to look at California. I don't know. We have like 1,500 miles of length to the state. Where I am in Santa Barbara is considered kind of central coast California, and we're not too bad. We never had. I do believe we have several thousand cases, but our hospitals still have room. And I don't know that we've had that, I think we've had several deaths, but not a huge amount. I think, Los Angeles is different, but people move around. So you get a beautiful weekend. Like we had this holiday weekend last week, Memorial Day, and all of a sudden, everybody from surrounding areas are coming to the beach and forgetting about, they're excited, and there's a big part of the population that are not doing the social distancing and the mask.
Yeah.
So then really we won't know for another 2 to 4 weeks what the result of that, in a sense, experiment. It's like it's all experimental. Nobody knows the answer. And if they say they do, they're kind of lying for political reasons, really. The one story, and we should maybe get off this, but the one story that I just read in the New Yorker magazine, that's an interesting example of what's possible with the proper motivation and leadership. Toyota had a particular, has to do with the automatic braking system. They had a particular little part that is in every car they make that has to do with the braking. So it's very important. Not an inexpensive part, a $10 part.
Okay.
The factory that makes those parts burnt down.
Oh.
This is a little while ago. Now, Toyota is like the biggest company in Japan, whatever. Within 3 days, they had various other factories, like this company that makes typewriters and sewing machines and things like that. They were retooled and ready to make that part.
Oh, cool. Outsourcing what that one factory usually does. Outsourcing the rest.
But in 3 days, they did that. And
that
we,
is crazy.
In the US, considering who we are, supposedly, in our capabilities, we've had months, and we're still barely retooling for the proper amount of things that we need for the virus. So there's something there in that story about, well, why was South Korea able to handle the virus so well? Why is Japan able to retool factories and turn things around so quickly? We're just, somehow we've gotten into such a bottom line greed-based system that we've forgotten how to really deal with a crisis, because everybody's just looking at their own interests.
Yeah, that and also that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Like what I read every day on my chronic, on my timeline in Facebook, is actually I have due to a collection group on Facebook, I have a good amount of friends in the United States, and the thing is, most of those guys, I only read, okay, liberals that, Republicans this. This is pretty much everything they care about. It's not about the virus, exactly like you said. The virus is that what's currently actually the pandemic is what is important. But they currently, I don't know, I have the feeling all they care about even more now is about, okay, who is right on the political side? Who is doing the right decisions? Is it the liberals, or is it the Republicans? Right. Well, Democrats, more correctly said, Democrats and Republicans. Sorry, I only listen to liberals, and I'm not even in the American Republic, and I'm listening to all of this, and I think it's just weird. It's just weird. There are so many other things you could have done, and I think the example you just put over there is perfect. That's how it's actually should be done. But I think it's also a good part of misinformation campaign. Like over here on my side, we also have problems that people are still walking on the sidewalk and they are just coughing out in the open, not even in your arm or anywhere.
That's unfortunate.
They just don't think about it and also don't care about it. But like you said, I think that's a good call what you made. Let's not go all political or virus tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So you said you had some questions for me, so I'm kind of
that's correct. At first, I just want to say there are a few fans from you in the chat. So we are just Meisner here just saying that he loves your scores, and I think all of the guys over here know what you were doing. But first question I just want to ask you, because I never knew that quite, because also sites like Wikipedia only had like a small of your filmography. Did you actually start doing music and doing scores?
Well, I always did music. I mean, from a very young age, which is a long time ago. So, you know, I came of age. So picture that I'm in junior high school, which is maybe 13, 14 years old. And the Beatles arrived. And I watched all the girls going crazy. Now, already my dad was a musician. I played the piano, I played the guitar, whatever.
Okay.
I watched the girls go crazy over the Beatles, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a rock star, because I don't know what to say to girls, but if they're screaming and chasing me, then that's a lot easier in a way, you know, or it seemed to be as a young teenage boy with my hormones flowing, you know. It was like, so, and also the other thing is, you know, when I would go to a dance at that age, and it's like the boys were on one side and the girls were on the other side, and everybody's like, oh my gosh. At least back in my time, you know, mid-60s, that's the way it was. And I thought, this is really uncomfortable. I said, the place to be is be one of the guys playing the music for the dance. And then you're cool and you don't have to deal with it, you know? So that was another motivation. So I became a singer-songwriter and did have some success, but never got back then, people weren't self-releasing. The technology didn't exist. Like now there's a way wider assortment of music in the world, because people can literally make a pretty damn good album in their bedroom on their laptop, and it's been fun, you know, and people are selling them, and you know. So at that point, you either got a recording contract with a big record company or you didn't. And I was close a few times and struggling with that. I wasn't breaking through. Really close with some big record company presidents who liked what I was doing, but things were shifting. And so right around that time, I had the opportunity by a kind of a fluke to write some music for a little educational film. And it was something to be shown in the classroom to provoke discussion, like little morality tales about how to treat a new kid, or what happens when you move to a new town and you feel lonely and homesick for your old place, and things like that. So they each had like music underneath the scenes, but also like a little song at the end that kind of encapsulated. So I got hired to do that, and they paid me, and I got to pretty much, I had a lot of freedom in what I wrote, and that kind of, as an artist, that kind of clicked with me. But I still, Rockstar thing was still happening, and I got involved with Paul Simon's office. And for a while, they signed me as a songwriter, and I still had hopes. And then I had my little stint where I was hired to be a keyboard player for Daryl Hall and John Oates, Hall and Oates, for about 6 months in the mid-'70s.
I know that's for my parents, actually.
Yeah, they were just coming up, you know, and they were doing this tour, and they need another keyboard player, and I signed on. And right around that time, I had my first opportunity to write the score for a feature film that was a small independent New York film, happened to be directed by somebody I knew, a friend of mine, and he asked me to do the music. And I really liked the process. plus I discovered being on the road with Hall & Oates that I didn't really fit the rock and roll touring thing, because I'm someone I'm more like a farmer. I wake up early in the morning, you know, and I'm ready to go. And those guys, you know, you go to bed at 3 in the morning and you wake up at 2 in the afternoon. So I was walking around these Holiday Inns all around the country, not knowing what to do with myself. We didn't have portable keyboard, we didn't have laptops. We didn't have ways to engage with music or the world that was portable at that time. So anyway, one thing led to another, and I decided I loved the process of creating music for film. And, you know, it took a while to get jobs and get established. And I was still in New York, and I got to a certain level where there was more activity in Los Angeles, basically.
Okay.
You know, Hollywood was the thing. There was a scene in New York, but even when you got to a certain level, the deals for the talent involved in the film were often being made in Los Angeles. So eventually, in the early 80s, I moved to Los Angeles, and, you know, one thing led to another.
Yeah, I mean, Los Angeles also where most of the parts of Terminator 1 and 2 was filmed. So there's actually where you were situated pretty much right from the get-go. So
yeah, it was shortly, you know, I actually arrived. I had done some pretty well-known television projects in New York. And when I arrived, I already had, my name was a little bit out there, but not so much in feature films. I did a few low-budget films, but certainly the Terminator was a big breakthrough for me. I think that was 84. Yeah.
Yeah, 84. That's crazy. When I think about 84, that was when you had one of your first big jobs, and I was 3 years old. I was 3 years old in 1984.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So, just a short question. This is usually a channel for collectors, so I'm doing reviews mostly. Only out of fun. Do you collect anything?
You know, I saw your, I saw pictures of what you were doing, and I remembered that I have somewhere, I don't know where it is, somebody gave me, maybe it was given away, but I have like a Terminator model in a box, but I don't even know where it is. I left it sealed. I knew that someday it might mean something, you know. Okay. But not only do I not collect stuff like that, and I have I don't know where it is, but I have my Terminator 2 composer hat that they gave me on the production. And it's amazing. So one of the reasons I'm doing all this social media is because I want to share this new project that I've created, this audio musical experience, full-blown 2-act musical, 6 characters. And so I want to share that. And it's interesting because, you know, I hadn't been much on social media for a while, and I started to show up. You know, my press person was helping me with certain things, and one day, just because, you know, she said, I really need to post things on Instagram quite often, and whatever you think, you know, take a picture. So I looked at this T2 composer hat, and I just took a picture of it and made some kind of statement, which was really true, which is that for years, I didn't really wear that out in public because it seemed kind of funky, like patting you, like, look who I am. You know, it felt funky to do that. So I wrote a thing saying I was shy to wear the hat. And we had, you know, when I was just putting the musical out as an idea with a trailer and all this, you know, we're getting some nice responses, and, you know, a few thousand people. And I put the picture of the hat on. And I think that's up to about 20,000 right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a lot of following for you and Terminator. And when people see like news of a new Terminator, may it be Genesis, may it be Dark Fate, the first question pops into mind. Oh, is BRAD FIEDEL maybe doing the music? Of course, you're in retirement, but now you're semi out of retirement. So,
to be clear, I retired from working for hire in Hollywood.
Gotcha.
I never retired from music. I have been creating nonstop pretty much. I did take a couple of years off in the early 2000s when I learned to surf and fell in love with that, and I became a bit of a surf bum for a while. But the bottom line is, yes, I did retire from. That's a very specific niche of work where you hire yourself out as a composer to add music to somebody else's project.
Yeah.
And that is something that I stopped doing in the year 2000, 20 years ago. Hard to believe.
Crazy.
But even since, like, I finished True Lies somewhere around 95. Even when I was still in Hollywood in the industry, I started creating my own projects because I realized as an artist, I was very grateful and privileged to get to add my contribution to some pretty good projects. But they were not consistently offered, you know, so I was offered things at times where, okay, you know, I have expenses, I need to take this project, but not the same kind of opportunity, let's put it that way. I realized that the way I would get to use my creativity the best would be to start developing my own projects.
Absolutely.
So that I could be the starter of something, not the person added at the end. And what I discovered, you know, we all have life lessons about changes that we make and feelings and attitudes that we have. But retroactively, I have to say that after 20 years now of, I'd say 3 or 4 major projects that I've created and worked on, I so appreciate and have so much respect for anyone, even on the smallest little, maybe somewhat mediocre projects that I work on, that people actually got something made.
Yeah.
Given the system, given all the hoops you have to jump through, given the tightness of money and getting people to invest, and the politics, meaning the entertainment world politics, not the national the politics of it all, and who's hot and who's not, you know, all of that. I really, because I discovered I'm really great to sit in my cave and come up with these really creative things, whether it's a score for somebody else or my own projects. But getting out in the world and having an understanding and having the persistence to just keep banging on doors even when they're shut in your face, that's required. When you see now, when you see something good, whether it's one of these great new TV shows, there's so much good television now, but or feature films, whenever you see something and it works, the cast works, the story works, it's really entertainment for you and maybe even thought-provoking in a good way, boy, you have to know that the people who did that were amazingly dedicated, and I just have the most respect for anybody who goes through in media, in entertainment, and gets a project done and out to the public.
That's a good point. What you said, actually. We're getting to music in a short bit, but that's actually what I did with you, because I just saw that you were online on Facebook, and I just thought, man, BRAD FIEDEL, you love that music. Why not hit him up? Just posting a question. There's no problem with it. That you could have said no, but you didn't.
No, I did not say no. And here we are on a Sunday, well, evening for you, Sunday, almost midday for me.
Yes, exactly, and I appreciate it dearly. But before we get to the juicy bits, especially, we have a huge Terminator fan that I'm in his shadow. We have hope of the future 2029. It's a neighbor of me. He's sitting in the Netherlands, Maurice Hosch. We got a few questions from the Terminator era, of course. But of course, at first, what is that musical you're actually working on? On purpose, I didn't check that out, because I wanted to ask you and have really direct reactions to what you were actually telling me. Would make more sense, I think. What is that? What you're actually doing, that music? You said
yes, it's a project that has taken a long time to evolve, partially because life happens and there's no deadline when you're creating your own piece. That's another thing. I mean, on the Terminator films, oh my God, the intensity of those. From when I got to when they said go start working to when I had to finish, you know, there wasn't a lot of sleep involved. But writing my own piece, and this one is called Full Circle, and it was designed to be a theater musical, you know, not necessarily Broadway because it's maybe not quite as commercial, but who knows. So it's designed to be a live theatrical piece, which really intrigues me. There's something about, which now of course is so difficult, but there's something about people sitting in a room together, whether it's a film or a live, but to actually see performers creating the moment live, knowing that something could change any second, where the film is the same every time, and it sounds the same, and it looks the same, unless the projector breaks. Anyway, so that really intrigued me. There's an intimacy in the right room with the right piece of theater that is very unique. And so I wanted to create for that. And I had some ideas, and I had some things that fascinated me, both story-wise and technically, musically. One of the aspects of the show that's really, you know, I almost feel like I shouldn't talk about it because you should just experience the show. But one of the things that intrigued me is I kind of like opera. Certainly some moments in opera are very powerful to me. Whether it's Wagner or, you know, Italian or whatever it is. But for me, when I sat through a whole opera where every single piece of information is delivered through singing, it's a little much. I just, you know, I enjoy it in some sense, but it, you know, I just was intrigued with the idea, well, wait a minute. What if there was a musical, more of a regular musical, where there's dialogue and songs, but there's a character for some reason who only sings?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
That juxtaposition. So in this story, the main story of Full Circle has to do with a teenage girl who's afraid to even, ironically in this time, she's stuck in her apartment, she can't leave. But she can't leave because she's so sensitive that when she goes outside, she feels all the feelings of everybody else. She's an empath. She's so so open. I think we all have parts of that in us. So that fascinated me. We've all learned, like when I lived in New York City and I needed to get from where I was living to a recording studio, I walked past homeless people. I saw all kinds of things on the street, but somehow I had to be able to numb myself to that so I could keep on my goal, you know?
Okay.
And thought, what would someone be like who didn't have the ability, didn't have the way to put their shields up to move through New York City and actually not freak out by everything that was happening there? So that's this teenage girl, and she has this, she's watching an old man out on the street from her window and feeling him, and he's got weird stuff going on in his head, and she's kind of almost psychic. There's a little magical quality to this show. It's beyond, a little bit beyond what some would consider reality. Has a little bit of that element, but that guy that she's watching, she has no idea who it is. It's actually her estranged grandfather. And the way she discovers that is he collapses and she forces her mom to go help that guy. And the mom calls an ambulance, and one thing leads to another. And there's her grandfather who's had a stroke, who she's never met, living in her apartment.
Wow.
And the relationship between them, because he can't speak. I won't go any further, but he's the one who sings, right? So this relationship between this teenage girl who also sings songs because it's a musical, but she has a particular style of singing that might almost relate in certain ways to classic musicals that you would imagine. But then she's got this grandpa who basically communicates like he's in an opera because that's all he can do. And what goes on with them and what gets revealed about his past and why she never met him. There's all this mystery involved, and that's what the show involves, and it really deals with a lot about family history and trauma, though there's a lot of comedy and fun in it, but underlying it is a story that has to do with how trauma in a family can be passed on through generations, even if you never met the people who had the trauma. And they're actually, since I wrote the show, I wrote it from an intuitive place, but there's been I've been developing the show for well over 10 years. And in the interim, there's more scientific proof with mice and different things that they've experimented where trauma in one generation actually changes the DNA content.
Okay.
So literally the trauma is passed on.
Wow. Okay.
So they would do something to this one mouse, right? Unfortunately, because I hate, but they would freak the mouse out on purpose when a certain thing happens, right? Like if you go, there's food there, but if you touch that button, you get a shock. 2 generations later, without reintroducing that stimulus, the next generations are afraid of the button.
Oh man. Okay,
so
that's hard.
I think right now in our society, that's a really interesting discovery, because they've always talked about, survivors of trauma and their kids and their grandkids. And they had kind of a psychological understanding of how that can happen. And much of it is through psychology and through how, that grandfather had something traumatic happen and he treated his son in a certain way, which shaped his son, which in a certain way is why the son treats his teenage daughter how he does.
Yeah,
that's kind of like the nurture, nature versus nurture. That's one element of it. But the other aspect they're discovering now is it's actually there biologically.
That's an interesting point. Like I just rewatched Parenthood, the movie with Steve Martin, and this is essentially the same thing, but it's just in a comedic way. Exactly the same. He's left at the stadium, and now he's trying to do the same thing, just I don't know, like 180 degrees, and he's nurturing his son to death, and now he's becoming the whiny kid. While he was the whiny kid because he was left by the sides by his father.
It's funny. Yeah. Anyway, that's that's a piece about it. There's all kinds of music in it. It's very different than my Terminator stuff. So I'm really encouraging people, that it's really good to give artists some leeway to work in different ways. So that if you appreciate an artist, whether it's an actor or director, and they do something different, to have a little faith that maybe in some way you'll appreciate that other work, you know? So I'm hoping to have just even some small percentage of Terminator fans actually experience this musical, because obviously I wouldn't have done it unless I felt it had something to contribute to our way of thinking, or at least our hearts a bit,
Oh, I think a lot of fans will actually check out your stuff, because like for myself, since I saw that your Facebook page is active again and your Instagram is active again, I'm checking every video you posted up, and also every post, just to see where Full Circle is moving. And what you said actually resonates a lot. I don't know if you know that band. There's a band out there called Fear Factory, and they use the Terminator movies as an emphasis, a lot of inspiration for their songs, and they use some samples from T2 for their album Demanufacture, and they actually wrote 2, maybe 3 concept albums, and they went down the same road, where an automaton is built but is starting to develop empathic powers and starting to know the struggle of the human race, and is now starting to get alive and everything. So
that's interesting.
It's there's also a bit booklet with a lot of story in it, and at the same time the later album from those guys, The Industrialist, that's a fun part. That automaton is actually communicating through singing. The actual songs is actually him singing to his crowd and then bringing over
very
the message.
cool. Have to check that out.
So exactly, almost the same what you said, but I am stoked for Full Circle. I want to see that. The story sounds amazing. I really like that. But your time is limited. So
yeah, I'm realizing yes.
So a few juicy bits. Like I said, you got a huge following below Terminator fans or under Terminator fans from your Terminator 1, 2, and also T2 3D time. And do you know that how big that actually is? Like, there are still companies out there that are doing collectibles for statues, and scores are being done. Like, there's currently a fan game out there being done, TechCom 2029, a Terminator game. And there is, I believe he's Polish by nature, Andrzej Faworczak, and he took your work as inspiration for his work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy. I just need to check my questions real quick.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you know, having grown up most of my life without social media, it's not a natural thing to me. But somebody posted something and said, "Have you seen this?" And there was a guy in 2015 who posted a YouTube, I guess it was, and it's just, you don't see him, you just see some keyboards, and it's his cover. There's been many covers of the Terminator theme, but it's his cover of the Terminator theme. And I'm watching it and I'm thinking, you know, he's done a pretty good job. That's not easy to do that live. And I just looked over, because I don't, you know, I looked over at the page or whatever, and it said something like 7 million views of just this guy's hand playing the Terminator theme. So that's when I had some realization that, wow, I had no idea really, you know, how meaningful this is to so many people. I avoid social media because I think it's kind of egotistical when people post all this stuff like anybody cares. So that was kind of my attitude, like, oh, who cares about, you know, what I'm doing today or what I'm thinking about or this story about my past. And then I was really convinced by fans, by their responses, to keep going with it in spite of Full Circle, you know, that this is another whole thing, because this is just my way of giving something back to the fans by just because they seem to love it, you know. So why not? You know,
they love it big time. There's actually a guy out there on YouTube. His name is Python Blue, and he I don't know how he just amassed the files from your old synthesizers, the one you used for Terminator, and he replayed a lot of score pieces from Terminator 2, like the Galeria suit, which never got released on CD. Like, this is also a huge question. I just pulled it ahead. I just pulled it up to now. Do you have, this is a question us Terminator fans is driving crazy. Do you have any idea what actually happened to the masters of the Terminator 2 score? Because until now, there's never been. Yeah?
I was asked this question recently by a number of people.
Okay.
And there is an answer to it. I think, because frankly, it never made sense to me, because when I make so I do a score, it's all very time, you know, crunch. And then usually right as I finish the score, I have the masters and everything, and I mix down. They say, what do you want to put on the CD? And I choose the most meaningful cues. There are a few times in life, like the original Fright Night score, where they only put one piece of mine and they put all these songs. So later they release the score, much later. But usually there's a fair amount of freedom. Back then there was a time limit to how much information one CD could hold, and they weren't usually doing double CDs. So that was the limitation. So I never quite understood, because I really felt with Terminator, I put everything that was, I thought, musically interesting or meaningful and not repetitive. So in other words, if there's one cue that has certain kind of thing going on and I repeated that, I wouldn't usually put both of those up, because to me, compositionally, the album shouldn't be repetitive. You know, that was just my point of view. I had no idea back then about fans or any of that. I didn't even know anybody was listening Really. I mean, I'm not being like, it's really true. It's really just since social media happened that I realized anybody knew my name or cared or was paying attention or any of that.
Okay.
But it never made sense to me, but I never stopped to really think about it.
Okay.
What are they talking about? The good stuff's on the CD. I picked it. I put it on there, you know?
Okay, so
the answer is,
okay.
And the answer is that there were a few moments in the film, a few sections where I was in LA and the film was being finalized at Lucas Skywalker Ranch. There's a post-production that George Lucas did. He created up outside of San Francisco. So that's where everything was being mixed together. And I'm usually at the place where that's happening. But because the visual effects were so late, that's why I wasn't in the same place. So there's a guy, his name is Alan Rosen. He's my music editor. He's the one, back then, it wasn't digital. So they took my music and they transferred it to sprocketed magnetic tape, but it would run on a film reel.
Okay.
And it would run in sync, and then would mix it all. This is very, talk about nerd. This is very nerdy stuff. But now it's totally different. It's all done inside computers, but then it was physically, you cut the music and taped. It was like film editing used to be with picture, but it's the same with sound.
Yeah.
So it looked like a piece of film, but it was the material that recording tape is made out of, magnetic particles and whatever. So the bottom line is, very often happens, luckily not happened that often to me, but Jim Cameron was up there and he fell in love with certain parts of the score. Okay. In particular, they just somehow, wow, that's the piece, you know? And he was mixing other section of the score where I had done something different. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, let's, Alan, my music editor, take that other piece and edit it to fit this other part. And he swapped it.
Okay.
So now when fans are, all of a sudden it occurred to me, because I kind of was telling someone the story of how there was guys sitting outside my studio and they would take my, when I finished the mix master, they literally, we were so up against it, they would literally take it to the airport and personally get on a plane and personally deliver it up north in California.
To have it in time.
Right. And it was all just, they were waiting for it, you know? Mm-hmm. So this happened very fast and I kind of didn't think about it much. And I never really even saw it. Alan said, I'm sorry, but Jim, because he knows I'm very control freak oriented. I want the piece of music exactly where I designed it for, whatever. But in many films, this happened. I mean, notoriously with this particular, all directors, but with this director, when he worked with James Horner on Aliens, he completely kind of changed the score, and very few things are where, and that caused a bit of a rift for a while. Okay. Him and Mr. Horner. But anyway, the bottom line is I believe that the cues that people are missing are actually sections where Alan cut in versions of my other cues in another section so that it doesn't exist on the CD for that area of the film. So if I designed a piece for running through the mall. I mean, this is not an accurate thing, but one of the moments, and the music that I used, Jim said, no, I like that other piece better. And he took a piece from somewhere else and put it there. This happened in just a few places, but I believe that is the mysterious missing material because I never had a master of that. It was on the run, on the mixing stage, in a back room of the mixing, and the only place it exists like that is in the actual soundtrack of the film, married to the film. It's possible if there was enough demand that they could take the music units, which were those magnetic tapes, right? And there are certain music unit A, music unit B. All my stuff for T2 had 2 units because I wanted 6 tracks of flexibility for percussion and other elements. So those tracks maybe in a vault somewhere exist. They would have to be put up literally, you know, on old-fashioned machines that I don't even think are hardly around anymore. And then that sound would have to be made digital, and then we could make it and release it. There may be already a digital print of the film where they have the music on a separate unit, and maybe it could be gotten from there. I don't know. So
okay. Yeah, because it's very interesting. What you just said sounds a lot like what they did with Fritz Lang's Metropolis. You know, a British label just released that a few years prior, and they actually found a almost complete version at an Italian museum, and they were able to get all the bits that were missing, and reprogress that, enhance that, and put it in there, and everything that was missing, just small cues actually, second-wise, they were able to write this together, so people had at least a description of what is actually missing. But this is the most complete version you were able to purchase.
Well, it could be that this is only partial as far as what people are looking for, because there may be other moments that existed, you know, and I just didn't, as I said, I thought it was repetitive or whatever. So as a composer, I believe that that if people could just like take a breath and relax about it, that the CD really contains all the composition, because the stuff that those other cues were made out of were taken from another cue that they actually have on the CD. So they're, you know, yes, I understand if you want every musical moment from a score, who am I to, I mean, I'm flattered, right? But the bottom line is, I think the CD contains all the important material. Okay,
that's okay. That's cool to know. That's cool to know. But just so you know, the guy I told you about, Hope of the Future, he had a project. He had a project with a friend of his, and they took the old Terminator 2 Skynet edition. They ripped apart all the 6 sound cues, you know, 5.1, and then they extracted the music from that and reassembled it into the track and have a full score.
Well, that's exactly how it would have to be done. The only problem is that the soundtrack would include all the sound effects and dialogue as well.
They were able to rip it out there essentially.
Actually, it's being dipped so certain words get through or certain sound effects. So it's not really a pure music track. Hey, but if people want to listen to the, in a sense, it's like the opposite of a silent movie. It's like listening to the movie without the visual, which brings me back, because I do need to wrap it up pretty soon, which brings me back to Full Circle, which is very much like that. It is this complete soundtrack to a musical, like you were in the theater pretty much. But what it is it's the songs, it's all the dialogue that the character, all the scenes and the dialogue that the characters say to each other. And then occasionally there's a narrator, because in the script, there would be what we call the stage direction. So if there's something that isn't revealed by the music, the songs, or the dialogue, you would hear the narrator say, because I designed this to be using screens, projection screens, to portray certain other environments, you know, because mostly these people are stuck in this apartment, you know. So if from the script, the narrator might say, on the screens, there's a mystical images of a mystical forest or something like that, you know. But anyway, it's just that. It's like you sit back, close your eyes, and hopefully imagine the whole thing.
That's essentially what's happening to us fans. Like, this is why we want a full score, because we love to immerse ourselves in everything and just listen to it, and that's what happens to me. But since you said we were wrapping things up slowly, we're gonna kick it up a notch. Did you hear the soundtracks or the scores of the sequels afterwards? So 3 and Genesis and Salvation and everything, and if so, what you think of it? Do you have an opinion on those?
No, I listened to some bits, you know, truthfully. Maybe someday. I just, you know, this sounds interesting, but I just wasn't that interested in seeing those films for a number of reasons, you know.
Gotcha.
You know, it was a little weird. You know, this whole idea of sequels, very often, if it's Star Wars, if it's whatever, the same crew is moving on to the sequel. Not always, but often. Or if the director changes, the original producer director is very involved. What happened with this, and I think the rights were moving around to different film companies or whatever, is that up until this last one, which I also haven't seen, where at least Jim Cameron was a producer on it and involved to that level. But, you know, it's kind of like, I kind of wished, though I didn't want to keep doing as an artist Terminator over and over again, frankly. I think I get you. 2 was good, and I'm sure that's what Mr. Cameron felt, you know. I just wasn't interested in it. There was some politics involved where you know, on one they actually asked me to come and do the commercial on the number, the first one after T2. I don't remember the titles, but T3 basically. I did the commercial, and there was all this involvement, and I thought, well, I'm going to get the call, and nobody called me to do the score. I thought it wasn't like sour grapes. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to just, this is from my past. I'm going to leave it behind. I have other things I'm doing in my life, and I don't need to rehash the old thing or even hear what people are doing with it. I did listen to some of the uses of my theme because I was curious, you know, whether it was only in the end titles. I have not heard a lot of it. I know from the cue sheets and the way my royalties come in that there's been varying amounts of use of music that was inspired directly by me in the various films. I don't know. I haven't seen anything from the most recent one. I really did enjoy Junkie's, what is it, Junkie X? How do you say this?
Right, Junkie XL. Tom Alkenborg.
For what was the big film that he did? The
he did Deadpool. He did Deadpool. And
no, but another one with Charlize Theron.
I don't quite know. No, I can't recall that.
Sequel to another. Anyway, I enjoyed his music on something that I saw, so I was like, wow, this guy, you know, he has the chops to do a good job on this. And
I was super hopeful for the score, and I was extremely disappointed. I was super disappointed.
And I keep hearing that, and it's like, I don't need to go through that, you know? No. What I enjoy once in a while is when somebody posts something I had no idea about, and there's this kind of, quote, rock orchestra or something with strings and brass and all this, but also like rock band playing the theme, or some marching band somewhere playing the theme. That tickles me. I think that's really fun, you know.
Yeah, when people really put the work into essentially recomposing what you did and do it for an audience and do it on a grand scale. I think that's super respectable. I think it's also cool what Python Blue did with your pieces, and that's also what I asked him, if I could actually rip his music and put it on a CD. So this is actually 2 CDs worth of your music, and it's ripped from YouTube. It's not the best quality, but it's not I don't know, it's not Super Nintendo quality. So at least there is full score material out there if you care for that. Yeah. But Maurice Hirsch, Hope of the Future, had 2 specific questions. I would put that on because everything else we pretty much had, and I don't want to take up your time for too much longer. He said, or he asked, I have heard that the audio mixing for the Terminator 2 3D show in Hollywood is different compared to the one in Florida. More bombastic in Hollywood. Did you return to do the mixing for the show in Hollywood?
No, there's so much about T2 3D. I have to tell you, that was kind of a hit and run project. I forgot what Jim was doing. Maybe was he on Titanic then? He wasn't very involved. I was working with the people who were designing the ride, you know, the experience. I had to do some very weird technical stuff to create the soundtrack for the 24 independent channels of sound.
Yeah.
And the only place we could mix it was in the room in Florida, where it was supposed to be, not supposed to be, where it was first experienced. So that was really like the crazy situation where I was staying in a hotel in Orlando, trying to sleep during the day because we couldn't go in and do this work until everyone had left the park. So we were on night shifts. And oh, it was crazy. There's stories about that, but you know, things were going wrong, and it's like the fog's rolling out, and they had these very high-tech borrowed mixing boards, and all this mist is coming towards the boards, and people are jumping, and because it's not designed to be a mixing studio, it was designed to be a theater for people, and they just kind of jerry-rigged our whole mixing situation. So that was the only mix I was involved with.
Okay.
And it was an interesting experience. It was a very kind of unique, because you just don't run into. I actually simplified the music, because it's hard to describe, but music, we're oriented to hearing it kind of stereo from in front of us, pretty much. Now, if you have a little drone flying around and he's flying around behind you, it's really cool to hear that detail. So for the sound effects, I thought it was really cool. But we started out, and I had made it so we could really play with the system, with the music. And as we went along, I said, basically the music should just fill the room and support the experience. And the detail of your flexibility of moving sounds, you don't want to hear, the electric violin sound or the French horn sound move around you, because the musicians aren't going to be running around. We're not thinking that way. Yeah. So we did made use of the channel, so at least the music was what I felt powerful, given all the sound effects. And that's the last. I went to the LA. They had a big opening, and they asked me to come, and I did some interviews and stuff. So I was at LA. I don't remember. There was a lot of time in between, so I don't remember distinguishing that detail of difference between the two. Okay.
Then the final question. Then you're off. This is the second one from Hope of the Future. He is interested in some visuals. Is there perhaps any picture or video of you working in the theater? I have seen various images of the Michelli brothers in the theater. Is there perhaps any image of working inside you of the T2 3D show that you are willing to share?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
So here's the thing, it's funny, because it goes back to one of your early questions about, do I collect anything? And I said, not only do I not collect that kind of stuff, the stuff that your folks might be interested in collecting, but I don't even collect images of myself. So now that I'm doing more social media, I can't tell you how many requests I'm getting. And I realized that I don't have a single, I don't even think I have a single image of me with James Cameron anywhere. Wow. He did come to my wedding. I have a picture of him at the wedding, but I mean, that's a personal thing. But I never, the composers coming up, and some of the ones from the past, but coming up and understanding more about the desire of fans and the media, they're videotaping themselves. Like, I wish I had something for me, in the studio with 110 musicians on True Lies, or there are certain moments. I don't even have mementos, because my family, my mom and dad came from New York, and I kind of gave them a treat where I had them in the control room with Mr. Cameron while we were doing the recording of True Lies on one particular session. And I don't believe I have to tell you, I have always been so dedicated and so focused, and quite frankly, often because of the pressures, in survival mode. In the midst of a project. That's why I'm amazed when somebody thinks to do promotional photos of themselves, or have maybe their own PR person film them in a session, or I just never, and I'm not faulting them, I'm actually faulting me. I never thought that way. So
I wouldn't say faulting if I chime in. Some people thrive on that. You just didn't. You just worked. You were just in the
I had, just like you're doing, I had blinders on. I think there's a couple of old pictures of me in my old LA studio sitting behind the board that I've seen out and about. I don't remember how they even got there, but I have no scrapbook. I have no digital or analog scrapbook of pictures of me involved with anything that way.
Okay.
Just one of those I guess they say some people have their eccentricities. It's one of mine, which is I wasn't trying to be mysterious. Here I am, I'm revealing myself. But back in those days, I just didn't think that way.
Yeah, it was also a very different time. Today, it's just everything is just so open. Everybody has always a camera on there. There's food posted, and every little thing of the smallest brick in their house, everything is essentially revealed. Yeah. That's essentially what the world is today. But do you mind one more question?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So again, hope of the future. Like I said, he's a super fan. Did you create the music for that teaser? I believe so. And how was the process of creating that music for a teaser?
Which teaser?
I would say I believe he would talk about Terminator 3. What you said, where you were working on.
It wasn't a teaser. Well, I don't know what they officially called it. In fact, I got this question recently, and again, I don't remember. I didn't have the answer. It was a commercial. Mm-hmm. It might have been in the category of a teaser. Okay. I don't remember visually, but I remember they literally hired me. I think I did a 30-second version and a 60-second version. So someone asked me, did I do the trailer? And I looked at it, I went, no, I didn't do that. And it was like almost 2 minutes long, and I know I didn't do that. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't take some pieces of my music, but I literally did an original unique score for some 60-second commercial. I just think that, it was the commercial agency that hired me, not the studio. It was a commercial agency that hired me to be on to do the music for a commercial they had been hired by the studio to create. And it may have been one that had kind of I saw one little flash. I said, I think it was that one where it was just like the T. There was like a graphic one. It didn't have a lot of scenes because I think it was somewhat early on. They may have flashed a few scenes, but I think it was kind of minimal as far as actual footage goes.
Okay. The final question for me on a teaser, actually, I was always curious on the Terminator 2 teaser that was released back then, where the endoskeleton is actually being assembled, and with a flash with Arnold going all around it and everything. You didn't do the music for that, right?
Not specifically. I don't see. The thing is that early on in the promotion of a film, now it's a little bit unique because this was a sequel. So there was the theme pre-existed. Mm-hmm. Whether an ad agency composer, did their cover of some of the music or use some of the music from, because the score, as we know, there's a lot of time in between Terminator and Terminator 2, and the technology changed a lot, and the films are very, very different. One's this really edgy, low budget action horror film in a sense, science fiction, and the other one is just a big epic Hollywood kind of thing. So most of the time when you're doing a score, you haven't recorded yet when they do certain promotional materials. Mm-hmm. You're still composing. So time-wise, most likely I didn't do anything promotional directly for T2. Now I might have shipped them some tracks if they said, "Can you send us some a little sample mix of what you're doing or the new version of the theme?" Truthfully, I don't remember, but I didn't specifically sit and score anything promotional. I just scored the film.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, maybe they used something else and put some different arrangement in there. That's that could maybe be the case. That would have been another question I would have had, like how much crunching would be involved on T1 and T2, or what if you maybe, I don't know, did you had pretty much a lot of free time during T1 and T2 scoring that, and only sometimes Jim Cameron would be coming in and say, dude, we might need to do this another way? Or did you had a lot of free space to do that on both movies?
I don't know a film or a composer you would talk to that would talk about having free space.
I think so, right?
Just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because by time everybody gets their act together and decides to green light something and it starts shooting, the marketing department has decided the best release date. And everything runs late on the production side, especially when you're doing you know, all these optical effects that, you know, used to take a lot of computer time to generate. You know, I did a lot of scoring on both of those films where we'd have a black slug on my video transfer. Yeah. And it would just say scene missing, scene missing.
And you would work over a gray screen, see what the best you can do, essentially.
And maybe Jim would tell me in a meeting, well, that's going to be this, or that's going to be that. The thing is, once they had the effect, it was always a different length, so we had to redo. So no, I mean, Terminator 2, by time, luckily I knew some of the main material, and Jim sent me some early scenes, like the canal chase I started working on while they were still shooting. He did send me certain things so I could kind of plot out and show him at 2 in the morning when he was not on set. He would come by and I'd be sitting there waiting for him, and I would show him, okay, this is what the T-1000 sound is. This is where I'm thinking we go with this scene. And he would give his approval or say, you know, on the canal chase, you're scoring too much the weight of the truck, and I really want you to score the scared mouse little boy on his motorbike. You know, he would give me a directorial, which I really love that, working with directors and almost being treated like an actor, and being where the director doesn't talk music. They just say, this is your motivation in this scene. I want to heighten this element of this scene, as opposed to, this is a comedy and I think you should have a xylophone right there, you know?
I got you. Experienced. Okay, but hey, at least there was some, like you said, communication, like different than, I don't know, you probably, just as a smart stint for me, you probably don't know anything about scoring video games, right? Because there's currently a big and weird story out there. There's this game called Doom Eternal, and the composer for that, Mick Gordon, and the game studio had a weird falling out. Like he was scoring everything, then he arranging it down, like the wavelengths, really compressing it for the use in the game. And then this full soundtrack was supposed to be in the collector's edition of the game, and it came late. And now the collector's edition, or the music for the collector's edition, was released with only the compressed soundtrack and not the full wavelengths with all the instruments and everything. Now they're only fighting essentially each other, and now it's going back and forth. Who is to blame? Was it Mick Gordon because he did the wrong arrangements, or was he too slow, or was the game studio too fast? This is never to know the ins and outs. That's why it's super interesting to talk to you and see how actually.
When you are creating music for, and I don't know the game world, but I know that almost always the music is at the end of the line. By the very nature, a little different on a sequel, but by the very nature of filmmaking, a little bit more from the old days, because we didn't have digital editing both in the film and in the sound. It's a lot easier to make changes now, but it used to be you went in and recorded an orchestra to this magnetic stock, and you either had to re-record it if the film changed, or the music editor had to cut it, or whatever. Now it's a lot more flexible to do last minute stuff. But the bottom line is, you need the film, and I imagine somewhat the game, you need to have the timings. Or writing the music for the chase, or even a comedic thing, the timing of the music is essential for making its proper contribution. Now you can use, and I've heard it a lot around, but you can use a loop, and it isn't really scored so specifically. It's just, okay, here's this kind of musical environment. It's just going to keep running, and then when we change something in the picture, we'll change the music as well. But I was always trying to be sensitive frame by frame to the picture. And therefore, the music by that nature, till the picture is shot and edited and somewhat what we call locked, you know, meaning that everyone agrees this is it, you know. This is fine. Though now, you know, they'll show it to a focus group and they'll change everything, you know, even back then they did that. But the bottom line is you're at the end of the line. So the train is running late for one reason or another, got a late start, had to stop at too many stations, meaning, you know, waiting for optical effects or whatever. The release date stays the same. So the composer is in the middle. I'm trying to see where both of my hands are showing. Okay. The composer's on the middle, in the middle, and he's just, it's like one of those suspense movies where they're in a room and the walls are closing and the water's rising. That's a composer's life, basically.
I get that. I wanted to take the I don't know, the comparison with, there's this brick wall, and this brick wall isn't stopping, but you are running onto it like no chance. This is the end. There's no more time.
Yeah, so I believe, at least, you know, there's never been extra time. You know, Jim is somebody who's got his hands in every part of a film. Whenever he could, he would come by. I never wanted to put anything in the film, even a moment, that he hadn't specifically approved, right? Because that would screw things up later, especially when I was mocking up True Lies and I knew we'd have a 110-piece orchestra there. And I had signed in blood that I wouldn't go over budget, you know, so we didn't want to have big changes with the orchestra sitting there. That's very inefficient. So yeah, I mean, True Lies, I have this memory of working 16 to 20 hours a day in the last 2 or 3 weeks of that.
Wow. Talk about overtime.
Yeah.
Insane. Crazy. Okay. Brad, thank you so much for doing this. I'm over the moon that this worked out. I'm super happy. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for the chat, for being here. Please don't leave directly afterwards. I just want to talk shortly to you.
And thank you and everybody out there for your interest. And as I said, I'm hoping to parlay some of that interest in me as the composer for these iconic films into people opening their minds a little bit to experiencing something different from me in my musical full circle.
Oh, 100%. Hey, one thing that's important on YouTube is tags, and I put the tags full circle musical, Brad Fiedel, all in there.
Great.
So if you are interested in your new musical, they will actually see this. Again, thank you so much. It was a huge honor.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for everybody in the chat, and I guess I will see everybody very soon. See you soon. Be good, be well. Bye-bye.